You know that feeling, right? When you're in a conversation and it feels like you're speaking a totally different language, even though you're using the exact same words. It's a familiar experience, and honestly, it can be pretty frustrating. So today, we're going to explore what might actually be happening just beneath the surface in those moments.
It really starts with this simple, common observation. We're using the same vocabulary, maybe even following what seems like the same logic, and yet somehow we land on completely different conclusions. It's like this strange, invisible gap just opens up between us, right there in the middle of the conversation. And this isn't some rare thing. It happens all the time. You can give the very same explanation to two different people, and they can walk away with totally different interpretations. It feels like our conversations are moving forward, but really, they're just running on these parallel tracks that never quite meet. This kind of misalignment is, well, a fundamental part of how we interact every single day.
So let's call this an unspoken gap. We're going to start by just looking at this gap because it forces us to ask a really core question about how communication even works in the first place.
Think about it. If the words themselves aren't carrying this perfectly shared reality, then where does meaning actually live? Is it in a dictionary definition? Is it inside the person speaking? Or is it created by the person listening? Or maybe it's somewhere else entirely? That brings us to our next section, meaning as interference. Now, to try and answer that question, we might need a whole new way of looking at it. Let's explore this idea that meaning isn't a fixed thing, but something that's created through a process, a kind of interference. Okay. So the first and maybe biggest step here is to let go of an assumption we all pretty much carry around with us, that words are like little containers, and they hold stable, fixed meanings inside. This new model suggests that's just not how it works at all. So instead of being fixed, meaning is actually generated in the moment. It emerges, and it's unique to every single person, because it's born from the interference between the word and that person's entire inner world. Their context, their personal history, all their unspoken assumptions. This means meaning isn't something you just receive, it's something you actively create.
And this idea might go even deeper than just language. Some suggest it could be a theory of consciousness itself, that our very sense of self arises as an interference pattern from our observation of the world. In a way, we're all just walking, talking patterns of interference.
This really illustrates the shift in thinking, doesn't it? The old view sees meaning as a fixed point, like we're all trying to get to the same destination on a map. But this new view sees meaning as a trajectory, a dynamic, generative movement. It's not about the destination you land on, it's about the path you're taking to get there. So when we misunderstand each other, the source of that isn't really that we're using different words. It's that our own unique, internal patterns of interference are overlapping with those words in very different ways. That gap between us, it isn't a failure of language. It's actually a natural result of our own individuality.
And this leads to a pretty profound redefinition of what it even means to understand someone. In this view, understanding isn't about two people arriving at the exact same point of agreement. Instead, it's more like a moment of temporary stabilization, where our two different trajectories just happen to align for a moment, creating this shared resonance.
Now for part 3, a world of misalignment. So what happens when we take this idea and scale it up from just two people talking to an entire society? Well, the implications are, frankly, massive. This whole perspective suggests that maybe, just maybe, many of our biggest challenges come from this one single flawed assumption, that meaning is fixed and that it's universally shared. I mean, think about social divisions, cultural misunderstandings, even the friction we see in our institutions or our struggle to align with AI. They might all trace back to this fundamental misalignment. We so often think that our problems can be solved if we just have more data, more facts, more information. But what if the issue isn't a lack of information at all? What if the real problem is that this whole underlying interference structure, the way meaning gets generated in the first place, is completely invisible to us? All right, our final section, the shared horizon. This all leads us to one last pretty radical question. If meaning isn't in the words themselves, then what are we actually sharing when we communicate? Here's a powerful way to reframe it. Maybe we're not just exchanging little packets of data. Maybe, instead, we are co-creating a shared field of potential meaning, something you could call an interference field. And that completely changes the goal of a conversation, doesn't it? It's no longer about transferring the correct answer or winning an argument.
It becomes this mutual process of tuning. We're both just trying to bring our individual interference patterns into a state of temporary resonance with each other.
So we're left with this question to think about. If each of our individual minds creates a unique world, even when we're using the exact same words as the person right next to us, then what is that fragile, temporary thing we call a shared reality? What are we really building together in those fleeting moments of stabilized understanding?